Okay. Yep, none of it's working. I guess we just get to keep going.
Yep.
So if anybody can see this, that's me with the little looking eye, Jasmine. I can't seem to figure out how my to get my camera to work here today. I'm not sure why it's not working at all. But we get to move
Pivot.
on. So uh you got, let me know where you're at. Put it in the chat. It'd be great. Get some minute action going. Let's see here. Where is And if you guys are in Hawaii, by the way, we have an in-person event coming up in like the next hour. It's at a library at 6 o'clock. So if you want to head on down there too, you can do both, right? You can listen to this, and then when we end, the live in-person event starts on Oahu. If anybody's interested. Oh, Colorado. Yeah, you can't go to the in-person event. But I'm glad you're here, so you can still get some value out of this. All right, let's get this started. So every week, every week that we've been doing these workshops, we're picking out some topics that have been a big questions things that we've been asked before, common things that people tend to have as an issue. And tonight we decided to go with, can you still find rental properties that actually cash flow? So, over the next hour, we're going to walk through how we think about finding markets, what we're looking at, analyzing properties. CJ's part, he loves that. And we actually will be breaking down a live property together so we can hear exactly how to walk through it and hear how CJ thinks through when he's looking at properties. So, stay tuned. And of course, throw your questions in there whenever you feel like it. We will also have time for some Q&A at the end of this conversation. And then, we can just jump right in then. Sound good, CJ?
Sounds good.
All right. So, one of the things that we hear pretty often is, oh, well, it used to cash flow, but nowadays, no, there's nothing that really cash flows anymore. It's a common thing we kind of hear at meetups or events when we talk to people. So, CJ, if someone walked up to you today and said cash flow is dead, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say you're missing opportunity. Maybe it's a skill set, maybe it's a limiting belief, maybe it's the network that you're a part of. You might need to change your mindset or your network, either or both, and be open to what deals can look like in its current state. Real estate's always evolving. So what worked yesterday may not work today, and what worked today won't work tomorrow. So are you somebody that can adjust and change with the times and be prepared to pivot to find and create opportunities? The thing that comes to mind, if I were to go back to the COVID time, everybody thought the market was going to crash, and it didn't. Instead, interest rates dropped to historic lows, and properties and deals were flying off the shelf before they even were listed, or they were being bought way over value because everybody was jumping on the bandwagon of the low interest rates. And in that season, there's a lot of investors that I know I was working with and students of ours that were falling into the trap that I can't find a deal. The question is, where are the deals? And I guess you'd say what we would leverage, and the thinking that we adopted was the Warren Buffett rule: be fearful when everybody's greedy, be greedy when everybody's fearful. So people were buying things purely for the low interest rates, which meant, what are the deals that they're not looking for, they're running away from? And during that season, we found that we were able to buy what I call a hybrid BRRRR. A BRRRR strategy is acronym: buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And it's basically a flip. You don't sell, you keep for cash flow and rent. However, the hybrid takes out the rehab process because you're looking for distress or absentee landlords with rental properties that are underperforming or have deferred maintenance and capital expenditures, things that may need some capital infusion sooner rather than later. An example would be a roof. Maybe somebody bought a turnkey, didn't put away for a potential roof replacement, but now it needs it. It now needs to sell and is distressed to sell because they don't have the capital to replace the roof, and now they're motivated. Well, during that COVID season when rates were extremely low, we found a whole ton of opportunity of absentee landlords who had distressed turnkey properties. And we created opportunity in the midst where others were sitting on the sideline saying, there's no way we can buy a deal. Everybody's buying it. It's going off the shelf before I even get a chance to offer. And that's the skill set. That's the network. That's the ability to pivot and adjust to the times and find and create deals when you think you don't have it. Well, you're right either way. Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right either way. And since then, things have changed again. There's a lot of movement. Now we have higher interest rates. Now it's opposite. Well, it doesn't cash flow. Well, how do you make it cash flow? And that's largely in part to what we teach, right, Jazz?
Yeah, definitely. So for during COVID, there was a huge amount of people making excuses to why they can't. And so, what do you think it is today that their reasonings for there's no cash flow? Cash flow is dead.
Interest rates.
Okay. So then, what have you been hearing that people have been saying about interest rates?
I mean, they're still coming off. You got an echo, by the way. They're still coming off. You got to mute yourself. So they're still coming off the previous experience of the 2, 3, 4% interest rates we were seeing back in 2020-ish times. And now rates are hovering around 6.5%, 7.5%, 8.5%, depending on what market, what lender, what type of product you're working with. But that's a ballpark of what you're probably seeing today. And they're thinking that they can't cash flow. Well, if rates go up, prices tend to get stagnant, if not decrease, for an investor because we're looking to make sure it cash flows. When rates drop, prices increase because you can afford that spread. You're paying less out of principal and interest. So now it's more of the creation aspect. How do you justify and show a seller that as an investor, we're buying this property for cash flow, and if it doesn't cash flow, it doesn't make sense for our particular strategy? I'm not trying to speak on flipping, wholesaling, all these other vehicles that you could do regardless of the interest rate. I'm speaking purely on what we do, buy and hold for cash flow. So in order for it to work, we simply rely on the math. So those that are waiting for rates to come down are going to miss on opportunity today simply by not having the skill set to position yourself and make offers that make sense to a seller coming from an investor. And that's really what is holding a lot of people, I think, back in the current market. Or outside of rates, it's the uncontrollables, the president in office, the war that's going on, this or that, all of these things that, yeah, it does affect the market. And do I have any control over that? No. So what can I control? And we choose to focus on the things we can control, which is how do we become better investors, run numbers, and get good at what we do. You're still echoing, by the way.
I can't even get on. It's so weird. Well, so for today, in this environment, do you think it's mostly the interest rates, or is it where they're looking?
I basically shared that, and you're echoing, so it makes it weird. It's interest rate, it's uncontrollable factors, it's the fear of the unknown that I feel is driving more people to wait, which then means, in my eyes, I'm coming from a possibility that there's a lot more available deals out there for savvy investors who see opportunity now that can strike on these deals that nobody else is looking at.
So if you were living in different areas, right? That's the kind of where I was meaning. Like when people are looking, in people we've talked to, at least in California's and in Colorado or Hawaii, right? They're looking at places in their local area and they're seeing these interest rates. That's got to be a big factor as well. So when we're
Yes,
looking at numbers, of course. Oh, go ahead.
it really depends. If I were to sum up our process in a nutshell, you want to figure out your strategy that best fits you. So our story is, and those that know or who have followed us, or maybe you don't know, I was a UPS driver, and at some point I didn't want to do it anymore. And the vehicle that we found that would solve my immediate problem, or the strategy we bought into, was the buy and hold for cash flow. Look, there's a lot of ways to make money in real estate. There's a lot of ways to achieve your financial freedom goal or whatever you're looking to achieve while you invest. And for me, I wanted to get out of my job. And the strategy we felt best fit us, or for me, was to find consistent passive income that would be able to replace my paycheck on a monthly basis, not lump sum or large chunks of money, but sporadic. That's why we picked the buy and hold for cash flow strategy. When you identify your strategy, it tends to isolate and eliminate markets that work or don't work for that strategy. So, in instance, Hawaii does not necessarily work for cash flow. It's a high cost of living, high appreciation state where the average median house is about $1 million. The same $1 million house probably rents between 4 to 5,000. If you simply do the math on $1 million house, you need $250,000 as a down payment, and you're going to be negative cash flow. That did not serve my overall goal of replacing my paycheck with passive income coming through with buy and hold rentals. So it eliminated Hawaii or my backyard as a potential investing market. And it pushed us more towards like the Midwest or other favorable markets where the house price to rent ratio is more balanced and landlord friendly, and follows what investors typically use as the 1% rule in our strategy. 1% of the value of the home is what it should rent for. And in a nutshell, that gives you an idea it should be positive cash flow. Now, it's not a very formative or detailed calculation, but it's a general direction to give you clarity on whether or not you're looking at properties that would meet that strategy. And once you do, the next step, the final piece to executing and creating that result of buying that rental property, is creating the team. So identifying your strategy leads to the market, which then challenges you to build the team. Most investors get stuck around the team, especially when you're doing it in a city you've never been to or lived in.
Well, we didn't always start with that thinking, right? When we first looked at things, the math wasn't so much the issue or seeing it clearly. We were very emotional about it and needing to see, touch, and feel. So why don't you remind everybody like how our journey to really understanding those numbers kind of that did actually look like.
What do you mean in more simpler terms?
So when we first started, right, it was, you were determined, like we were going to get one in Hawaii because we needed to see, touch, and feel before you figured out that the numbers didn't really work, right? Like we had to do some serious math about what Hawaii would look like.
Well, that's the point, right? Like I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't identify a strategy or understand the strategy because I wasn't around people who were doing it. So I made the perceivable safer judgment call of, let me do it in my backyard, even though I have no clue on what real estate investing looked like. I had no knowledge of how to fix a property, manage a property, rent a property. It just simply felt emotionally safe for me to do it somewhere close to home because I felt like I had some level of control over it. But that's not even true. Like still to this day, I don't try to pretend like I know how I can rehab a property. I find the team members who are experts in and outsource it to them. And I work more on what I can control is my ability to lead and guide teams. So in the beginning, we want to do everything ourselves because we're focused around saving money. We're focused around maintaining some level of control around the fear of the unknown. And that oftentimes keeps you from moving forward in the strategy that best fits you simply because of comfort. So we in the space always talk about get comfortable being uncomfortable. And quite frankly, investing 3,000-4,000 miles away from your home in a city you've never been to is extremely uncomfortable for your first go around.
And it was extremely uncomfortable. I feel like it was one of our biggest hurdles we ever overcame, I guess you could say, right? And can you want to walk us through like the whole process on like our emotionally, like how when we got that first property and being able to say like that's that was just really a crazy experience. I feel like.
Yeah, I was in resistance for a good amount of the first year before we pulled the trigger on our first property, and then we sat on it for a year. We needed to make sure it worked. We needed to make sure we didn't buy a fake property. We need to make sure that the tenant was real, that the property manager was doing his job, that it was cash flowing what we thought it was cash flowing, and we sat on it for a year. Now, in hindsight, that was a bad move because we missed the opportunity to capture the market in its present day. And it's what we needed to get confident. We didn't have the network. We didn't have the support. We didn't have a community to reference. We had each other, and both of us were blind to this strategy and basically taking YouTube and podcasts and book information and figuring out how to apply it in real life and creating processes and systems that now are a little bit more polished, which is why we're able to move quicker and help move others quicker to create results far faster than we ever did.
Yeah. And although it was scary and we didn't have the support and we lost an entire year waiting, looking back, I'd still say it was it was one of the scariest things we'd ever did and the best things we ever did. Because if you think about the other option, our only other option in our minds was to buy in Hawaii. If we went with that strategy, where do you think we'd be today?
Still working, probably more than one job still.
So we don't really have anything in the chat right now about any questions, but I am curious. How many of you have been looking in your own state, whether it's California, Colorado, Hawaii, and hopefully in Hawaii you're on your way to IAEA for the in-person event. Suji, what is the biggest mistake people make before buying that rental property?
Biggest mistake. I mean, several. Blindly trusting but not verifying. So oftentimes people want to do it alone, and there's nothing wrong with it. We're living proof you can, and you get to be prepared to pay the tuition of the School of Hard Knocks. And um, yeah, not verifying could look like getting a recommendation from an investor that you may know from a network event, but don't really know them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of talk about what people are looking to do, less proven track record. And sometimes it's misinformation or being directed to a strategy or market blindly without verifying fully the credibility of the source. I see this a lot in Hawaii because Hawaii, in my experience, is very trustworthy. Once you have their trust, they're more willing to just say, "Hey, you said so, I'm going to do it." And that doesn't always work in your favor in real estate investing 4,000 miles away. You need to learn how to verify all the information so you can make an informed decision to move forward. Now, the offset to that is analysis paralysis. People are looking for more information, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. The problem with that, like I shared earlier in the broadcast, it's real estate's always changing. So what you were looking for information yesterday may not be relevant today and won't be relevant tomorrow. So you're always in this cycle of I'm just waiting for another thing, and it keeps you from moving forward. So I guess the two biggest mistakes is trust but not verifying, and analysis paralysis, meaning I need to learn a little bit more. You probably know enough to take that first step.
Yeah, for sure. And if we didn't verify the numbers when we were in Hawaii, looking at the whole, we were such an expensive market, and people were saying, "Oh yeah, we can find cash flow here. There's definitely cash flow," and we had listened to that, not instead of going off and really figuring it out and researching it and finding other options. I couldn't imagine, what the the frustration we'd be in right now on having, because you want to run through like a general idea of what numbers look like for us when we were looking, or even now.
Geez, I'll go off of one of our current students that we're helping. We've helped so many just get out of bad deals in high appreciation markets like Hawaii and California, where they bought a property thinking they were going to rent it for cash flow, but they were really playing the appreciation play over time and were eating, and if not self-funding the property until they could sell, right? Because the appeal in Hawaii and California are, and I'll just isolate to those two markets, is you buy a property, you know, eventually you hold it long enough, it's going to be worth far more than what you paid for. But in the interim, in the immediate time in between now and then, are you actually cash flowing or at least breaking even? And most often, 99% of the time, you're not unless you have high equity. Well, we have a student in our community who does have high equity. I think it's 40% down is what they put for their investment. I guess you'd say townhome-ish, brand new build, kind of rental property. I believe it was generating about 3,200 and they bought it for 750. That math does not work for positive cash flow. The thing that was killing this particular deal was not just the fact it wasn't even close to the 1% rule. It would need to rent for about 7,500 for it to be positive cash flow. It was the HOA. And in Hawaii, HOAs kill a lot of deals that maybe would make sense on the normal apartments or townhomes, because this HOA went from, I think it started off at 250 is what they shared, and now is up to 700 a month. So that's on top of your mortgage payment. And that's not something you pass over to a tenant. That's something you absorb, and it doesn't benefit you with paying down principal. It's going to the HOA. And do they beautify and keep up the area? To some degree, yeah, but it doesn't benefit you. It's outward flowing money, which means you need to wait that much longer. And if we do the math, $700 a month for a year, what is that? $8,400. And if you got to wait 10 years to sell the property at double the value, that's $84,000, assuming it never goes up again, that you're not going to recoup back on a property just like that. And what, in hopes that it's worth over $1 million by then? You're really cutting your profit slim. Not to mention, you're probably paying a little bit out of pocket to cover your mortgage, and that's not even covering any deferred maintenance or capital expenditures that may come up in the next 10-year period. You know, and you look in other markets, like in cash flowing favorable markets like the Midwest, you can buy properties for 100 to 150,000 that can rent for 1,000 to 1,500 bucks. Your positive cash flow from day one with little to no effort. Yeah, you may not capture a large appreciation value over time, but somebody's also paying down your debt. So there's four pillars to the cash flow model that really benefit you. Most fixate on just cash flow, which is important. You want to be positive, because when you're positive, it doesn't hurt you to hold it. There's the appreciation to the back end side, which Hawaii and California, pretty much all real estate markets get it at some degree. You got your tax benefits, the ability to depreciate your asset when you structure a property. And then you have the equity stack or debt pay down. The debt pay down is kind of like that ninja play where you're both ends of the spectrum. You're getting the appreciation, but you're also getting the debt pay down. So it makes your capital grow faster. You're speeding it up that way. As long as it's performing, somebody else is paying down your debt. And those are the type of deals you can find in a cash flowing market. So I would question, why are you looking in California or Hawaii? If you're going to buy $1 million house, you need 250,000 down. Even if you had that, you could probably buy 2 free and clear cash flowing properties and be making way more cash flow.
So the thing that really catches me about that story is they thought they were breaking even. Turns out they're in the negative, in order for them to eventually in 10 years or longer to get to sell that property so they can have a pile of cash, right? But the catch that I don't think most people really think about is they put 40% down for a $750,000 property, which means they had to put $300,000 of their own money down for this property just so they can have the honor of having negative cash flow for the next 10 years. How many properties can they buy with those kinds of numbers?
Yeah, it could be a very dangerous play. all your eggs are in one basket.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many times, how much scaling can you do in 10 years? Or, yeah, just that's, and how many people actually have the 300 in the first place to even get that one property?
Yeah, not a lot.
Okay. So that was a big aha moment for us when we like looked at those numbers and said, "Ah, we need to go out of state, right? And this is the only way it's going to get us out of these jobs earlier, not 25 years from now. So what do we do? First thing we had to do was figure out what markets do make sense. So why don't you walk us through a little bit like where we started and how we figured out like what markets, the numbers, and what a cash flowing state kind of looks like.
We learned about the 1% rule. I think it was one of the first things we figured out. Cash flow investors use as a general metric to figure out if the market produces cash flow. Like I shared, 1% is 1% of the value of the home. It should rent for roughly about 1%. $100,000 house should make about $1,000 a month. In theory, you should be positive cash flow. And that actually came from other investors. As we got more courageous and bold with putting ourselves out there, we found some people who were doing it in Hawaii, which is very rare because Hawaii is predominantly wholesaling and flipping. That's the strategy that works really well in that market. Very few people did buy and hold out of state, but the very few we did connect with helped give us a nugget or two to then go and implement. And that's one of the biggest steps a new investor can take is gather the information, but apply it quickly. So when somebody's doing something you want to do and they give you a nugget, run with it. For us, what it was, hey, I've bought here before and here's who I've worked with, connect with them. And that's what we did. So our first property, we connected through a referral of the network. And this is where the trust but verify, it worked for us on the first one. We didn't know we didn't verify, but it burned us on the second. And Steve knows because we did a recording on one of the previous workshops about what not to do, big mistakes you can do. But on the first deal, we leveraged a network member who introduced us to a market, to a team member where we were able to establish a relationship, explain to them what we're looking for, and then execute on the deal. And we bought our first property out there through the referral of the network.
Can you also walk us through the process that we went through? Because then not only did we go for the 1% rule, but we did the whole thing because we heard it on some podcast somewhere, right? The population growth, the drop, the landlords, taxes,
You did
there's
that,
a
not
lot
me.
of different things. Okay, I did.
You did that, not me. So the benefit of having my wife as a team member is she was able to do a lot of the legwork. I was more appealing. The deals were more appealing to me, figuring out the deal, making the offer, and so forth. So once she did the population growth, is this an area people are moving into or exiting? Is the job market like diverse in a sense where it's not hinging on one particular type of job? What's the crime rating? What's the school district? Is it landlord friendly? Is it tenant friendly? You can do so many different analysis of the market, and I'd actually caution against it because you're going to look for reasons not to do the deal. Just figure out one or two things that work. For me, it's the 1% rule, and is it landlord or tenant friendly? If it's landlord friendly and it meets the 1% rule, it's a potential market. That's a great market to look into to start there, and then you can go into the weeds if you want. But really, in theory, when you buy a singular property, how much impact are you going to feel if jobs aren't moving in quickly, if people are slowly moving out? It's not going to affect you on that scale. I think a lot of the market research gets skewed for new investors. They're trying to analyze a market as if they're a large hedge fund buying 1,000 properties at one time. Then it affects you a lot more, in my opinion. But when you're only buying one, it's not likely to affect you greatly. So yes, Jasmine, you did all of that, and I scrubbed the deal, and we chose that market because it made sense. It was landlord friendly, it positive cash flowed, and we moved forward.
Yeah, I bring that mostly up because, guys, it took me, must have been 6 months of just researching. I wish I had my video on so I could quote unquote research, right? and sit there and try to figure out which market would be the best market, whatever it would be. And I went down into these crazy sidelines of just analyzing and picking markets over and over again. And what if I didn't do this? And like CJ said, it doesn't move a needle for one property, right? It wasn't the important thing that we should have been focusing on, but I decided to focus on it, and I lost 6 months of our time that we could have been moving forward if we had just ran with something and got a result. That was a very big lesson for, and still is, right? Just being able to take what you have and move forward with the information that you've created so far, and just keep taking that very next step. So, but bringing it back, is anybody here looking at any markets currently? As anything?
There are some comments in the comment section.
Oh, you want to read them?
What is your process for supporting out-of-state investors in the Midwest? It depends where you're at in your journey. If you're brand new, we can support you getting started, how to identify markets, where to do the calculation, like break down that 1% rule, landlord friendly, doing your market research in more detail if that's what you feel you need. But we're also going to challenge you to move quickly to create a result. Because at the end of the day, you can have all this information, but if you've never done anything, how do you know it's true? The only way to verify any information you've gathered is to do something with it. And we're results driven. So we help people go from nothing to something, that first property. And if you already own property, but you don't own out of state, we help you get your first out of state property. It really depends. And that's where I'd suggest, if that's something of curiosity, talk to one of our team members, book a call. There's a QR code up in the corner. And let's see, another question. I have a few properties in Hawaii I'm looking to sell. Is that something that makes sense to offer here? Maybe I can get a call from a team. No, we don't buy in Hawaii. We buy out in the Midwest. We buy for cash flow, and Hawaii properties oftentimes don't cash flow. So it's likely your better bet is to find a meetup group that has Hawaii buyers looking for Hawaii properties. Let's see. Julie says Jacksonville, North Carolina, Miami, Florida. So those are the markets you're looking in. Do they cash flow? Do they meet the 1% rule? Are they landlord friendly? Would be my first two questions to you before you proceed forward. And that's everybody in the chat so far.
Okay. So if you guys want to also throw in a chat, we can do a live breakdown right now and put this into real practice, and CJ can walk through his thinking and how he thinks through analyzing a property. So if you have anything, then by all means just throw it in there, and we can do this live. I'm open to. So okay. And if nobody has anything already, then if you want to go and find something so you can use
I'm curious, Crystal, what's your numbers? You say it's cash flow. Is it free and clear? Maybe you're on the Big Island. I don't know. But even then, it's very tight.
All right. Well, if nobody has one, then CJ, you are prepared with something at least, right? You can go look up something.
Sure. Yeah, Big Island's a little different. Oh, it won't let me screen share. Big Island is different, and it's still Hawaii laws. Very, very tenant friendly. So if you ever have an eviction, which I hope you never have to go through, I hope it's speedy and quick. Oftentimes it's a very costly and lengthy process, and that can take away any positive gains you've gained over the years. Is this visible? I can't see anybody at the moment, so I need you to tell me, Jess.
You can see that. Yours, you pulled something up on Zillow. You're on the screen now.
Okay. If you guys can see this, here's a market in the Midwest that could cash flow. It's one of the markets we're in. So those of you who asked, well, what market would you suggest? This was one of our primary markets, Kansas City, Missouri. This is a property that you would equate to more of a turnkey property. And as you can see, it's recently reduced and they're asking 129 for it. I won't go into too much weeds of how I break it down because we don't have the time for me to teach for that long. But basically, assessing the property, is there any major damage or repairs that I can see in the photos? It looks fairly good. Inside looks a little dirty, some rough around the edges, usage, visible flooring. There's some dirt and debris left. The kitchen is basic turnkey finish, which is low grade. Still usable and serviceable. Somebody will rent here. But this is an ideal property for somebody who's looking to move into a rental without having to do much work, and fairly reasonable, if not cost effective asking price. There is one big CapEx item that I would point out is this basement. As you can see, it's likely spray foam up here in the corner. And the wall is bowing in slightly, which could be a capital expenditure that you prepare for and or leverage during due diligence. Now, this property is pretty close to the 1% rule, and how I simply check if the listing supports it is look at the listing history. You can do so much work off of Zillow and what's free out there. You don't even need an agent at the moment if you're analyzing deals, but you can see the listing history. Back in 2013, 2014, it was around $700-800 a month. Now up in 2024, it was listed for rent at $1,300. It probably didn't get rented until it hit $1,250. So $1,250 and list price of $129 is pretty close to that 1% rule. So you should be cash flowing, right? And in a simple way and a free tool everybody could use, and this is what I often use when I'm on a go just to get some quick numbers, is mortgagecalculator.org gives me an idea of what my principal and interest payment will look like with taxes, insurance included. So I can run some rough numbers to make sure I'm positive cash flow. So based on the history in its current condition, assuming that it was rented up until recently, tenant likely moved out somewhere around May or June, which is why they listed it, but it was pulled off market in 2024 of September at $1,250. It's safe to say that it could possibly get $1,250 in rent again. So I'm going to run that against my math. Assuming I offered asking price and I put 25% down, which is $32,250, a whole lot cheaper than $300,000. And running an interest rate that I know we're getting in our community with our exclusive network, 6.5% on a 30-year fix, with property taxes being identical to what the listing discloses, $1,257, and home insurance at $100 a month, and throwing in property management at, I'd say, $120, you add 120 to this, you're all in at $940, and I'm rounding up. And if you're getting $1,250, you're positive $310, which isn't a bad deal for a turnkey that requires little to no work. You simply got to list it. Now, the skill set of making sure that you're buying a solid asset comes from your experience. And if you don't have experience, how can you leverage it? And that's where communities matter. It's what we do. It's what we teach. And it's what we support with people who are new to this. So they have more confidence walking into that first deal and not feeling like they're going to get burned.
So I know you've analyzed thousands of deals over the years that we've been investing. Probably, yes, absolutely. And this is, so you may have gone a little fast for people who have never seen it, or even analyzed the deal before. So can you walk me through a little bit more in a slower pace? Like, what was it? Let's start off with, what was it that caught your eye about this property in the first place that you started analyzing it?
The 1% rule. If you're looking for cash flow, you want to make sure cash flow's first. And using the simple 1% rule, you're asking 129. The last known rent that it was rented at off of the listing information, obviously we get to verify, was $12.50. That's pretty darn close. That alone, with the fact that it doesn't appear it needs a lot of work, which you'll never know until you're under contract. And anybody who's done a deal will know that inspections will flag something. If you have an inspector who flags zero issues with a property, fire them and hire a new inspector. There's always going to be something wrong with a property. And for simplistic analyzing purposes, I want to make sure first it cash flows. So I'm looking at price and I'm looking at what it could rent for. And if I don't have rental history, I'm going to pull from other properties in the close vicinity and see what they might have rented for. I'm not looking for anything accurate. I'm looking for general, right? And in this case, it's simply cash flows right off the bat, assuming nothing's wrong. And what we don't want to do is over assume negative things about a property without fact. I know a little bit of history about this deal. I know a little bit more about it because I've already looked into this deal, and this is a national seller. This is owned by a large firm or hedge fund or some sort, and they're not a normal type of seller. So they're not necessarily motivated, and they're all calculated. So it's a different type of seller you're working with, which changes your play of analyzing the deal. But in a nutshell, if this were a normal person, this would be a decent starting cash flow property with little to no work perceivably needed pre-due diligence.
So going through knowing that you've kind of had an idea of this and being able to have the experience that you have now, what do you think your first time in looking at analyzing deals, CJ, would have done versus what you would do today?
I would have found many reasons why the deal wouldn't work, which is natural. It's fear. I don't know what I don't know. And that's what keeps a lot of newer investors who are wanting to do exactly this, buy properties for cash flow and buy it remotely, from ever taking that next step because they're too afraid of what if. And that's where support comes into play, whether it's a free network or a community like ours. Either one can serve people to move forward, but you got to stay connected. And my suggestion to anybody new who's wanting to find a good group of people to run with, are they doing what you want to do, and do they have what you want to have? If they answer those two questions yes, they're a good fit, right? So I would overanalyze, and I would likely talk myself out of the deal if it were first deal, CJ.
Yeah, and we actually see this a lot in the community, right? They are over analyzing, and you have to have the same conversation with them. What is the thing that they when they're telling you this, what is the thing that you like to say to them?
You don't find great deals, you create them. If it were a great deal on market, it would be gone already, because somebody more savvy and more confident in their ability to do a deal would have locked it up already. So if the deal's on market, there's still possibility to create it. So the question is, how do you create it? And do you have the skill set, confidence, and support to ensure you're covering most of your bases? You're never going to cover it all. I'm not looking for perfection with any mentee I work with or any student we work with. We're looking for what's going to create the result, because the result gives us the most important thing. The thing that taught us a lot, Jazz, as we grew, feedback. We ask ourselves what worked, what didn't, and what are we going to do differently? And the only way you can ask yourself those three questions is you got to create a result.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. If we didn't create that first result, regardless of how long it took us to actually get there and do it, we would never be where we are today, for sure. And I think that's a big part of the biggest takeaway I think we'd have tonight. It's not finding some magic market or, getting lucky or anything like that. It's about having a process, knowing what questions to ask, and knowing what to look for, right? And of course, having that community to push you forward and keep going, because you can easily make excuses onto why it shouldn't work or why I can't or why now is not the right time or anything like that, right? Absolutely, having all of those things is incredibly important. So we're going to jump into Q&A, but before that, my final question to you before we can, so if you guys want to drop some questions now, let us know. And for you, though, who do you think should book a call with our team after tonight's call?
Someone who's stuck in analysis paralysis and just can't quite seem to figure out what they need to do next to move forward. Someone who is looking to do buy and hold out of state for positive cash flow, realizing the market they're in doesn't support that. People who should not book a call are those that are looking to flip or wholesale or do those other vehicles, which can create financial gain for you as well. We are very fixated and focused on what we do, and we do one thing: buy and hold for cash flow. So if that's something that you're striving for, it's something you're looking forward to, or maybe you have a common pain point like I did when we first started, want to quit your job like yesterday, this will probably be a beneficial call for you to jump on with one of our team members so we can walk through how to best support you.
All right, guys, that's basically our main conversation we're having tonight. If you want to throw some questions in there, if not, I'll just ask CJ one or two more before we end. And hopefully tonight gave you a different way to think about finding rental properties or even where you're looking to invest in the first place. If you're wondering how this applies to your situation, I put the link in the chat, or you can scan that QR code at the top to schedule a call with one of our teammates, and they'll learn a little bit more about your goals, answer your questions, and help determine if the best next steps, what would be specifically for you. And if that sounds helpful, go ahead and grab a time, and we're wrapped up. So let's look at the chat. I'm interested in. Go ahead.
Julia is saying she's looking at duplexes and quads for rentals because she has a VA. So it sounds like you want a house hack at some level, a rental property. Is that correct? That's a slightly different play than what we were talking about today, and it's a starting point. The real question is the exit. I think oftentimes investors who are looking into starting in multifamily forget about the exit. We typically recommend start with single family homes because it's the safest play. Single family homes can be sold to an investor, but it can also be sold to an owner occupant. Now, multis, you may have a small pool of people who are like you that want a house hack and buy a duplex, live in one side, rent out the other. But majority of the buyers out there looking at multifamily are going to be investors. So it's very important to ensure you know your numbers, because on the exit, investors are going to scrutinize the deal not off of what the market deems its value, but off of the performance, because it's purely driven for an investor to buy. So that'd just be my tip for you, Julie. Totally doable to house hack a duplex or quad. Just ensure you have a strategic exit plan for when you want to sell down the road, because eventually you will likely want to sell.
I do want to jump in on that too. So duplexes, quads, doing that with the VA benefits. I know that's a very big strategy that is put out there in a lot of different podcasts and a lot of different places. And that's a great strategy for people when they don't have a lot of money and they want to find. So the idea behind it is to have other people help pay down your mortgage, so you're not having to pay a mortgage or rent. And so you can take your income that you have from your jobs and build up more for a down payment so you can start buying more properties. Now, that is also, you have to live in it every year. So if this is a strategy you're going with, it's year after year, you're moving to a new property. That's part of your strategy. If you've got family or kids, you get to buy the investment property where it makes sense. So you don't get to choose the community you live in, right? And it's a longer process. It takes a while to accumulate as you're moving year after year. And finally, the big one, it doesn't work in every state. That does not cash flow if you were living in Hawaii. Even if you were doing that and having a duplex or fourplex or any of those things, the numbers don't make nearly as much sense. So you would have to be living in those areas that make sense, right? So just giving you all of the understandings, depending on the areas, it's going to matter as well.
So Julie, your property you posted, it seems like if that's yours that you've owned for some time, you have a lot of equity in there that you could strategically place into larger deals or multiple deals. And that would require more of an advanced strategy and skill set to do. And you have a lot of capital you could potentially play with if you got it for what the previous listing price was, and it's worth roughly where Zillow has it placed. That's a good vehicle to scale from one to multiple doors very quickly. No mortgage on the property. I love that. So I hope you're somebody that likes that too. I would encourage looking into tapping into it, if not exiting, if you're wanting to scale from one to more doors quickly. Maybe that's something you can bring up on your call tomorrow when you having one of our team members. We can see if there's a strategy that we could suggest. If not, see if we could support you with.
It's one of our favorite things is to reallocate and create a new strategy for people with that with equity, for sure.
Yeah, we like to we like to say we play Monopoly in real life. Oh, Jake's a good guy. He'll be able to ask you some really good questions and give you some ideas of what's possible, and we'll probably support you with. I'll watch out for your call and see if I can give him some ideas too as well if he gets stuck for whatever reason.
Yeah, and if anybody else wants to go ahead and book a call as well, that's what we love to do on these calls. Go through your situation, understand where you're at, and so we can build out something, because we love that. That's one of our favorite things to do. Like the possibilities that you guys have is so endless. If you just don't know what you don't know, and because you don't have the experience we've had and the things that we've done. And we love being able to just, I love that moment, right? When you just see their eyes go, oh my God, that's actually possible.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what we did. We started with those little greenhouses and we turned them into red hotels now. And everybody should start with the green houses.
All right. So when we started off, let's just go with that. And we had that one property. And when you go through like the thinking of what we, why we wanted to wait and all of the things that we did in our minds, it was to justify and then finally overcome, like we get to build this.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure it was real, that this actually works, and it took us a year to realize that.
I often look back at that time and thinking of how much, like the 6 months to a year, it was about 6 months to a year before I even brought up the idea, because I was just looking through things. And then when we finally bought something, and we still sat on one property for a year. And then right after that, where did we go? Like we went the next year, we bought 7 or 8. And then the year after that was like 20 or 30, something like that, right? It went so fast, so quickly. And then we were out of our jobs with the 90 doors by year, 5, 4? And can you imagine, like, if we had spent that year prior and that year waiting, those 2 years we lost, where would we be now? Just because of the speed after getting that real proof of concept and moving and starting to scale, that scaling process, we would have been out of our jobs in 2 years, easy.
Well, that's why they're saying the best time to invest in real estate was 20 years ago. Next best time is now. Point I take behind that, or what it meant to me, is start. Don't wait. Start and we'll figure it out. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And back then too, now we looking back, when we were buying, that was like the best timing, unbelievable. But at the time, all we'd heard was the market's going to crash, or all of these other reasons not to buy and wait. And if we had listened to any of that, it would have, wow, just where we'd be.
Yep. So if you're wanting to connect with the team, please book a call and we will begin wrapping up our workshop for today. Thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties we're having with the echoing and the lack of camera. But we will be on in 2 weeks, so please be on the lookout. Follow us if you want more information. And if not, you guys all have a wonderful rest of your week. and go get something done.
Take care, guys.